Hello everybody, and welcome to a webinar all about engaging parents and educators in the wonderful SAS process. So there's a series of these webinars out and about on the portal that you're on, so have a good look around and find those other ones as well. So here's today's hefty topic: how to boost engagement with parents and teachers. And with me, I also have Kathleen Davey, the CEO and clinical psychologist of the Social Skills Training Institute. Hi there, Kathleen.
Hi, Kathy. Thank you once again for helping us with another webinar to include in the series.
Pleasure. It's nice to be back, and I guess those listening in, you'll be hearing from both Kathleen and I during this literally a conversation, and we'll be chiming in and out, so you get to hear a couple of perspectives and some extra gems dropped in as we go along. So we've worked together to kind of craft this content, and this webinar, perhaps more than any of the others, really has been very collaborative, as we've just challenged what we need to include and why we need to include it, and even a little last minute, fair to say, we've been shuffling around some slides and making sure that we are as practical and as helpful as we possibly can be, so that we can support you guys in the delivery of the SAS program. And look, absolutely, this is our best thinking on the topic. However, there is a disclaimer statement that I need to read on behalf of the SSTI. So maybe get yourselves comfy as you listen through. Any material, content or resources shared and discussed in this SAS support webinar is general in nature and is used to guide service planning discussions and support only. The Social Skills Training Institute encourages all participants to think critically and appraise the content for their organisation and personal circumstances. The Social Skills Training Institute does not necessarily endorse content shared and accepts no liability for any consequences resulting from adhering to the content shared in this webinar. It's always the very formal bit that we need to get done first, isn't it?
It is indeed. It is, Kathy. But it's a good disclaimer.
Yeah, it's really important. Like so many parts of what we do, there are lots of ways to be right, and that critical thinking and that filter across what you're about to hear is only going to amplify the value that you get from this and the positive impact that it will bring to you running your program locally, wherever you are around the world. Right, so let's just have a little bit of a startup think about some of the engagement challenges that you may or may not experience in delivering the SAS program. And I've collected some of this from the workshop that I've attended and from colleagues and clients that I work with. And it probably won't come as a huge surprise that perhaps one of the biggest challenges in engaging the grown-ups, if you like, is time. Is actually time for setting blocks of time in your diary to do the support work, to do the documentation work, to be writing some copy or composing some fabulous emails or developing some support documents, even the time required to meet with parents and kind of go that little bit of above and beyond, the time to reach out to educators and bring them in as part of the team around the kiddo progressing through the program. So time, absolutely, we've all only got the same amount, and I'm anticipating that some of the bits and bobs you'll hear in this presentation will really be able to nicely slide into your diary and not be too taxing on the time bank for you. Another challenge that I want to put out to you, and I wish I could kind of hear your thoughts on this, is the reminder about appreciating the unique mindsets and the unique energy levels that everybody has. And I'm talking about you as the person delivering the program. You have a unique mindset and energy level. Parents are coming with a different mindset and different energy levels, and educators as well. And I guess this is sort of a little bit of a sliding on comment into judgment, and how you kind of potentially, maybe unconsciously, judge people based on how they show up. So this is a bit of a reminder about leaving that judgment as best you can at the door, and very much bringing mindfulness and curiosity and patience and kindness into the interactions that you have with obviously the kiddos, but also the parents, the carers, the educators, even your teammates that you're delivering the program with as well. I'm just really mindful of kind of the role that comparisonitis might have, which is where you might be kind of rating and comparing the parents, the teachers against some of the stars that you may have kind of rated in the past. And yeah, we don't always know people's backstories. We don't always know how much effort it has taken for them to get to where they are right now as well. So just to bring that one to everyone's attention first up. And yeah, I just didn't feel it was complete without having that little moment share. Kathleen, what are your thoughts?
Cathy, I think it's a really great topic to bring up, and I just want to extend it slightly to even before we meet our clients or the teachers, or you know how you're talking about comparing to your gold standard parent or teacher.
Your stars.
There's also the other end of, this has been really difficult in the past and this one or two particular parents or teachers haven't engaged, and therefore I'm going to preempt that no one's going to want to engage.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that attitude that we bring is really important. Yeah, great way to start.
At the end of the day, I believe we can really only manage and lead ourselves, and it's the pretty hefty ask to expect everybody else to kind of work around you, and for you to be ready to change and adjust and be the version of yourself and the version of SAS Facilitator that the whole crowd needs you to be. Yeah, it's an interesting one. So I'll just pop off my soapbox now and click on to the next slide, and we'll make some progress.
I love that reference, Cathy. Sorry, it reminded me to those of, or most of the facilitators who would be watching this, in your training notes, during training you created a facilitator formula which had your top 5 qualities or values that you wanted to live when delivering SAS, and it's kind of exactly what, Cathy, you were just talking about, and going, oh, maybe it's a good time to go back and look what we wrote down when we did our training.
I reckon that would be a great checklist to revisit at the start of every design, at the start of the very, very start of every single program that you want to that you want to conduct, because it's also reasonable to expect that those values could alter a little bit as well. And yeah, good to check in on that good stuff. Rightio. So SAS, like any other program or product, whatever you want to call it, has features and benefits. And this kind of part of the presentation, it's going to sound a little bit markety, if you like, if that's even a word, it is now. And I want to point this out really, really specifically, because I think when you understand the difference between the features of the SAS program and the benefits of the SAS program, particularly understanding and leveraging the benefits, you're in a position to set a context for deeper engagement, deeper understanding, and deeper attachment to the why part of the program. So what we're typically more comfortable talking about is the features, and the SAS program is packed with features. There are computer games, it's a really cool themed learning experience, there's great resources, there's groups, there's games, there's tip sheets and meetings and questionnaires. It is a feature-packed program. It yeah, I don't think there's much else out there that really compares to the features in there. And that is very much in marketing speak, if you like, the what's in the box part of it. However, what we know is that people are much more likely to engage on the why. And this is more the benefits part of the conversation. And this is about the values and beliefs behind the program. So we're much more likely to buy on the why of a program and then justify the what and the cost and things a little bit later. So understanding the benefits, understanding the why, the big why that sits behind the program, is really going to be tapping into people's emotional senses, their emotional thinking. And that's okay. That's not a bad thing. This is a really strong point that I think people delivering the program could perhaps leverage just a little bit more. And so in some of the promotional material that you have seen in your training and in delivering the programs, there's really cool words like empowering kids to ... How can you be finishing that sentence with the grown-ups who are engaged around the child? This is a program that, as I understand it, really looks at identifying and positively managing emotions. That's some of the language that appears on the promo documents as well. And that the kiddos are taught to notice and act on the social cues of others. Now, even those statements have a little bit of a so what. If the kids can do that, what does it really, really mean for their lives? And this is really digging into the why. And I think every kid coming through the program will have their own personal spin on their why and their own identification of personal outcome measures out of the program. And I think that's really good, deep, juicy conversation to get into with the grown-ups right from the get-go. I think it's also really good to check in with yourself about those big whys of the program and to check in with your co-facilitators as well, so that you have that lovely clarity, so that you're increasingly confident and fluent in being able to talk about not just the features, but also to be able to really message assertively and ethically and effectively the benefits per kid, per family, per class, about what the program is likely to bring to them. We know we can't promise, we know we can't offer guarantees, all of those bits, but I think we could be looking at the benefits and the why just a little more assertively there. And I think that really provides a great basis of communication going forward. It kind of sets the tone a bit that that we're really here for the empowerment, we're really here for the outcomes of the program, we're really here and committed around this kiddo for the opportunities that the skills from this program will deliver in their learning life, in their social life, in their home life, wherever else it shows up for each of those kids. So yeah, it's very much marketing principles, features and benefits. If this stuff is interesting for you, you will find tons of it online, but I don't think you need to go too overboard, but other than to sort of challenge your thinking about what you describe as features, the what, and the why in terms of the deep value and the long-term, short, medium, long-term outcomes for the kids on the program. Yeah, Kathleen.
Cathy, I'm imagining this concept and our facilitators applying it in a range of different things, which I know you're going into, but just what you've said right now, it could be the how do I attract families to the program or to my service, which we have a whole nother webinar on as well. But also during the intake process, the way you're asking questions and describing the components of the program, making sure you've got that why included in those conversations. And then the parent introductory meeting, because they've gone through the intake process, they can tailor what they're saying when they're starting to set them up with some of the skills and tools that they want the parents to be using. Sorry, I'm only talking about parents here. Parents to be using throughout the program if they're really thinking about the why through all of those stages.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, depending on how you like to rock and roll, it may be that you can go straight in with the, or weave in at some point. Why do you think this is going to be such a good program? What do you think the outcomes will be? And to kind of bring it right up to life. And there may be some really powerful statements that you can anchor the grown-ups back to throughout the program by way of motivators, for want of a better word. Which is a very nice segue into WIFM. Now, I'm thinking some of you, I'm not going to tell you what it means because I'm thinking some of you know what it means. And if you haven't heard it before, I think you're really, really going to like it. So WIFM is, yeah, it's a little bit markety again, but it's a really helpful concept. What's in it for me? Okay, and this really is digging into and dusting off motivational theory. Many of us have had a glance at motivational theory in different places across our careers, whether you're coming from an allied health or an education or some other background. It kind of peppers many, many curriculums, which is a really good thing. And I wanted to bring this to the conversation today because I think it's really, really good to revisit and reconnect with the big, powerful drivers of human behaviour from time to time, bring that back into practice. So I guess this could also be part of some of those early meeting with parents and early meetings with educators. And I wonder what would happen if you actually talked to parents about what's in it for them as parents. With their children progressing through the SAS program. It's giving them permission to have a personal investment, a personal agenda into the whole program as well. And they may well be thinking some of these things. They may well be hoping with their fingers crossed for some of these outcomes. And I think on many an occasion, it might absolutely be comfy to go there and to identify what their perhaps secret agenda is for their kids. And I guess just off the top of my head, if a kiddo's coming through the SAS program, there may be a parent who is wishing for the kid to be able to manage birthday parties, family events, Christmas, occasions throughout the year, a weekend away, to be able to travel, to be able to have play dates at home. And so that's okay. They're actually really, really good outcomes to have that the SAS features will be able to set the kiddo up for a greater and more positive experience in all of those fun childhood events. Well, what are fun for most kids at least. And then I guess with the educators as well, what's in it for them if this kiddo comes through the SAS program? Is this kiddo going to be more capable in small group learning? Is mat time going to be a little bit easier? Is playtime going to be a differently positive with some paired play, some parallel play, some engagement, some greater curiosity, some greater conversational engagement? Is this kiddo going to be able to cope with the specialist classes of music and art and sport and whatever with renewed confidence and skills as well? And that makes the kiddos even more teachable and even more engaged in the learning process as well. And that changes the teacher's role around that kid delivering that kiddo's program at school as well. So I suspect if we think about motivational theory, we all have our own motivations, that parents launching into this program will have their motivations, and I reckon it's called tap into them, and that educators will also be thinking about the what's in it for me as well, and how this kid's going to be performing in the classroom, the playground, the art room differently and even better, and whether that lightens their load, whether that lifts the curriculum, whether it changes the room. I don't know, I'm not an educator, but I think it's good to kind of go there and explore some of those motivations, because there's a lot of work in supporting the kids through the program, and to be able to bring people back to their motivators, I think could be a really key part of engagement as well.
Cathy, I'm not sure if you're, I'm not sure if you're coming back to this later at all, but on that teacher motivation and what makes their life easier, the schools are really loving the SAS integration with individual learning plans and individual education planning.
Oh, I was just about, I was just about to say that, because that is just such a marvellous opportunity for collaboration and sitting together with the SAS program and looking how it does dovetail into the curriculum framework, how it does fit in so nicely into individual learning plans. And that gives you the chance to have that shared language and that shared thinking and those shared outcomes as well as appropriate. Now, I also understand that the teachers have got a role in the early days with some questionnaires as well. Do you want to elaborate just quickly on that, Kathleen, and how that can sort of bring them into the program and bring them into the team?
Yeah, so if we apply what you've been talking about so far to that, rather than just looking at those questionnaires as getting another data point, another person's rating on that child's abilities to inform your own practice in delivering SAS, that also can be viewed and used as how do we find out what's in it for them with the teacher. You could add an extra questionnaire to it, or you could look at the individual items and you could really use that and think about what does this tell us about the teacher and what the teacher and the child needs at school. So you have, Cathy, the intake process with the teacher. There's questionnaire booklets that the teachers ideally are filling out for us 4 times throughout the program. There's also an optional observational assessment that the facilitators can use, and it's ideally done at school, which it might be the facilitator doing it, it might be someone else doing it, but that I could see being really weaved into what does the school actually need you to focus on in that. What are you really looking for, rather than just what am I looking for as a clinician? What does the school need if you're a clinician?
Yeah.
I did want to also... Sorry.
Go for it.
If for those of you who aren't aware, the small group program is also mapped to the Australian curriculum, and we have a document, but for those of you in Australia, we have a document that outlines how it's mapped to all the curriculum areas, if that's helping you engaging schools as well.
I reckon that is a massive help. Massive help. The reason being is it breaks down some of the language barriers between therapists and parents and educators. We're often kind of talking about the same thing, but with some different language. So another great opportunity for collaboration and setting the scene even before the program has started, but it gives you some anchors to go back to during those connection points during the program as well. Right. So relationships take time, and where I wanted to kind of start with this section was another little reminder that as trained SAS facilitators, you have got a whole load of knowledge and experience and optimism that you carry around in your brain all day, every day. And if you've run these groups before, you've got a whole different set of experiences. You know what it's going to be like, you know how it's going to progress, you sort of anticipate stuff, but you're open for other curiosities as well. And it can be really easy to forget how much you know. And it can be really easy to kind of just be pacing against yourself and just ever so slightly disconnecting from the experience that the parents might be having, and disconnecting just a little bit from the experience that the educators might be having as well. And that's understandable. You've done it a few times. It's feeling differently automatic for you as well. You've kind of got the curriculum, the features down pat, and you're really, really hyper engaged with the kids. That absolutely has to happen as well. But I guess the message is really about not ever taking for granted or having awareness about the knowledge that you take for granted. And that can just sometimes be a little bit of a barrier. For some, it may not even exist, but it may just prickle up as a little bit of a barrier in terms of what you know and how you're running the program and the efficacy around the program and what the experience from others looking in on the program is. So just a little bit of an alert around that as well. And, you know, we sort of just touched on this in terms of the program and the curriculum and commonality of language. Teachers, therapists, parents are all awesome. They're all differently awesome and differently skilled, different experience, and they very much bring different wisdom to the team as such. And it's not that anyone is better than anybody else. I would probably put the expert badge on the parent as a rule with their lived experience, but it can just take a little bit of time to kind of calibrate that energy and acknowledge the shared wisdom and to clarify the language. I've worked as a clinician for the vast majority of my professional life, and I'm still sometimes needing to check in about the language, the words that I might use and how that's perceived by a teacher or an educator, and vice versa as well. And it can just mean that we can sort of set off on a little bit of an unintentional tangent because we haven't clarified the terms, we haven't clarified the thinking, we haven't clarified the scope of what we're going to be doing, for want of a better word. And I think the SAS program features has such a strong operational flow and focus that you can really use that to bring people in, to align the concepts, to align the language that you're going to be using, and to get a common language amongst all of the grown-ups. I think the kids will probably embrace it first and run with it fastest, but to really use the language and concepts to bring everyone together. I know it's a cliche, but it is literally on the same page as well. And I think that this can work really, really nicely even before the kids start the program. In another webinar, we've talked very energetically about the phase, the pre-program phase, and the, you know, up to 6 weeks before the program, when you're marketing and messaging its features and its benefits. You can even build some of that engagement even before they've signed up. But to really be setting the scenes, setting some core expectations, starting to perhaps even seed the idea of what's in it for the grown-ups, and very loudly and proudly advocating what's in it for the kiddos going through the program as well. But I think also in that pre-phase, you can also really shine the light on the benefits. That slide we had a couple back, really shine the light on the why. Why is it so important? What are the outcomes going to be in the kid's life down the track after the program as well? And I think you can also really start to kind of pace the relationship as they perhaps get to that stage of signing up and investing and signing on the dotted line, that you can then have a really nice messaging sequence. And we'll talk about how in just a quick little minute, where you can really set the program out, and you can have some orientation even before the program starts, some orientation to the computer game, some orientation to the cadet handbook. You can have some orientation, just some high-level explanation about the gadget pack, but you can also have in place the save the dates, when the program's on, when the reviews are going to be happening, the graduation ceremony, getting those kiddos up and getting the medal around their neck as well. And you're actually kind of building engagement, building the relationship even before the kiddos walk into the room. So yeah, that sounds like a lot of work, and not gonna lie, it's gonna take some energy up front. But what we talked about in the marketing webinar was, when you've got these scripts and you've got these letters and emails, when you've got all of that copy, as we call it, ready, you can reuse that time after time, just making adjustments. Obviously, you'll adjust the date and you'll always be wanting to improve it, but you're going back to do 10% of the task with every group thereafter as well. But you're bringing people along on the adventure with you right from the very first reach out, the very first inquiry. And then as people do sign up, you might even kind of split that group off, and you might have a different email group that really orients them to the features and the resources and the satchel and the meetings and the tip sheets and all of the rest of it. So MailChimp could be your friend. You know, I know here in Australia, many of the practice management software systems integrate with MailChimp. MailChimp's a bit of a global crowd favorite, and you can have different segmented groups in there, and you can have all your messages ready to go, and you can tell MailChimp to send it on this day and to resend if it's not open. So yeah, it's a bit of work, but the tech isn't nearly as hard as you think it is, and you're really putting in a whole lot of investment up front to set the scene for the best possible engagement with the facilitators, the parents and the educators from the get-go. Kathleen's got a hand up.
It's automatic. For those of you who are educators in a school delivering it as the SAS facilitators in a school, you don't have to be setting up a new system as such. Whatever you've got working, you know, some schools, and I have lots of cloud-based communication with parents, or they have an existing email newsletter structure, you know, all of those things you can apply what Cathy's saying to what you already have in place for your parent-school communication.
Yeah. Yep. Make it easy, embedded into natural routines. There's also opportunity for facilitators, if they're outside the school setting, to work in with the school and deliver some information sessions as well. So I understand that there's a slide deck that is a presentation that can be used, so it's ready to go. It's all branded, it's got all your topics. It's good for you to pack up and go. And I guess this is a collaboration opportunity, an introduction opportunity as well, so that educators can get a sense of the whole program calmly and quietly in their environment. And you can start some of those conversations with some of the questions that we've talked about to date in this session as well. And I even wondered whether or not that slide deck, whether you could do a little a video with it if it's a bit tricky for you to get out and get to schools using something like Zoom. You could do that slide deck and talk through pretty quickly and easily, and that means you've got a resource that you can reuse as well. And I'm wondering, is there an equivalent that educators could use when they're running it in schools to kind of be able to prepare a visual and a talk over pack for parents, Kathleen?
For parents. So firstly, I was thinking you were thinking the school information session, and that can be used. That can be used internally as an in-house with the other staff.
Yep.
For parents, there's not a set of slides in the program materials for schools to do an introductory session with parents, but the very first thing you do after intake is a 2-hour session with parents. It doesn't matter whether you're a school or not. So they have that. But what people can use prior, which I often mention in training, but sometimes it depends on what questions I've been asked or not in training, is we have a set of slides that's called a community do-it-yourself information session on SAS. So that in the facilitator portal, you can download the community information session slide set, and they're generic. This is what SAS Small Group is about. It can be used with parents, teachers, funding bodies, you're in-house to upskill other people so they know what you're doing in that room that makes a lot of loud noise when all these kids come in. You can use it for promotional purposes or for preparing in what we're talking about here. So that's probably the best answer to your question.
Good. Okay, good. Learning fast here. Other opportunities to advance the relationship and advance the engagement are very much the intake meeting. And it's when parents and carers, maybe even the teacher, could attend as well. And I guess a lot of those meetings are face-to-face, but I've thrown into my notes, I don't know if Kathleen has noticed, whether or not those meetings could be virtual, given the busy working nature of so many parents nowadays as well. But I'm just harping on Zoom here. It could be done virtually, it could be recorded, and I'm just thinking about how perhaps dads could be differently engaged, how mums could be differently engaged, maybe grandparents, maybe nannies, carers, all of that. Is there any reason why it couldn't be done virtually?
So the preference is for everyone to come together so that they are forming a support group and learning as a group process just as much as getting information. So that's why it's preferred. People do Zoom or Skype in or whatever, for example, if they can't physically come. You could run a virtual group. If that's going to work. There's nothing stopping you doing a virtual group with your parents, but I would steer away from the recording it so that they just passively watch later. It needs to be,
correct.
Half of that session is actually successes and challenges and implementing what you asked them to do the week before and working that very individually. So you could do it virtually with parents who are tech savvy and a good process. And certainly, you know, if you've got one parent in the room, one parent at work or whatever, that's a great way to do it.
Yeah. So once again, it's an idea. You're going to run the filter over it. You're going to know what is going to be your strongest preference and what's really going to support the parents and educators that you're working with. So toss it in the think tank, and you can let Kathleen know how it all works out. Now, I wanted to put this in because established communication agreement, and my suggestion is that you have a statement of your commitment to communicate up front and potentially quite bold and loud. And once again, this is sort of setting the scene for how we are all going to work together. Sometimes often when I've run group programs, whether clinical groups with kids or groups with grown-ups or whatever, I sort of set the rules of the game is what I currently call it. And it's very much about how we will each show up. It's very much about how we agree to play the game as such, very much about the communication and the respect and the confidentiality and the collaboration and whatever else your communication rules are. But this could be something that is often unsaid and is therefore a little loose and isn't as vibrant as it could be. So perhaps under those circumstances, things fall off the table, perhaps things kind of slide and are left unsaid or unnoticed, or there's variable accountability and things like that. So you will all have your own level of comfort with setting up some rules of the game or rules of engagement. And this communication agreement doesn't have to be a PhD in everythingness. It can be a really simple statement. It can be developed collaboratively in some of the early sessions when the grown-ups are all available. It can be put into print. It can be formalized. I wonder also whether it could be part, and this is where the timing gets a little foxy, whether it could also be part of the service agreement that you have with the parents for the child to participate in the program. And I guess here in Australia, particularly in the private sector, the private practice scene, if you like, service agreements with families are very, very common, and often detail funding and cancellation and communication, things like that. So it is a document that certainly the Australian listeners will be quite familiar with. And I would be encouraging you to think about your communication policy, your communication agreements that you have that the adults sign on to. For those listening overseas, it may feel a little different, but I'm sure as now I've described it, you have your equivalents, and whether the communication agreement could be made a little more explicit in any documentation, contractual type documentation that you have your customers sign with you as well. And I guess this sort of goes back to what we were covering on the previous slide about how to engage all the parents, all of the adults, caring adults as appropriate, and also how to engage maybe the primary educator, but there also may be other champions for that kiddo in the school as well. And if you can tap into to them, that is going to be a mighty fine thing as well. You may also want to turn this into a quick video. You might want a flyer about it. You might want a poster about it. You may find that establishing the communication agreement is super powerful for the way you run your groups within the SAS context, that it is worth kind of getting it visual and getting it off pen and paper and yeah, go for it. It might be just that leverage you need to remind everyone about their commitment as grown-ups into this program as well. I think, and we touched on this a little before, is to bring the SAS conversation, bring the features, the benefits, the outcomes into naturally occurring communication systems, whether it's newsletters, whether it's individual learning plan meetings or your equivalent of wherever you're listening from, parent-teacher meetings, team meetings, and just normalizing, bringing it into everyday kids support communication systems. Kathleen.
I was just going to add, with the communication agreement and the service agreement stuff, you could repeat, or if you repeat it when you do your group guidelines in your very first parent session with the group, and do it, you can do it individually and as a group. So whether or not you're a service who does have service agreements, you could do it in your group guidelines session integrated in there.
Yep, sounds good. So good having you here, Kathleen. Just so good. Right. So, support between sessions. And my thinking on this is that if you've done a whole lot of strategic, assertive work in the onboarding process, we're talking about the grown-ups, the onboarding process, in the marketing and the pre-sign up, and then the sign up, and then the getting ready and building some hype and engagement and energy. I'm rubbing my hands together. I don't know if you can hear that. But this all then kind of sets the scene for the pace and the energy and the motivations that you need to be maintaining right across the entire program, and to a different extent across the maintenance program once the kids are finished with the formal program as such. And if you've got some insight into the personal motivations for the parents, the personal motivations for the teachers, if you've got clarity on the language they're using about their hopes for the kiddo, for the outcomes for the kiddo progressing through, you have a very, very bright and very, very powerful agenda and motivator for reaching them during the course of the program as well. So once again, I think we sort of said in one of the previous webinars is that yep, sure, there are meetings, there are checklists, there's the structural features of the program, but whether or not you can have some additional background information flowing through as well, whether there are some really lovely nurturing and empowerment email sequences that happen right across the program as well. Once again, you write them up front, you tweak them, and then you can deliver them repeatedly with every group that goes through, using words that are really going to be identifiable and relatable by the parents and teachers who are on the other end. You're wanting those emails to stand out. I also wondered, and I just popped this into my notes, and Kathleen and I had a quick chat about this before we hit record, but I wonder if there's some value also about providing some copy and some information and some wording that is very, very child-centric and almost in the child's voice, and whether you can actually think about how you can empower in a slightly extra way the kiddo to potentially be a messenger as well. So that's something that you can have a little bit of a think about. I might be off on a bit of a tangent on that one, but you're really adding to the kids' experience and setting them up to have that own pride and that own sense of empowerment and participation. What are your thoughts?
Correct me if I'm off track here, Cathy, but I'm thinking an example of that, or where you could apply that, would be with the skill tracker, with the child engaging with parent or with school staff member to get their skill tracker done each day.
Yeah.
That they're initiating it in the way that they're communicating, the way they are asking for it. Is that an example of what you...
That would be very much an example, but if there's some backup information happening via email, then the context is provided for the kids to go in with their personal message about seeking assistance.
Wonderful.
Yeah, so I think you can approach it.
Then I think with the between session missions, yeah.
And I guess what I learned out of this preparation with Kathleen the other day was, in fact, the research. Please, you're going to have to step in here, but there's really, really strong research that when the kids are completing their missions, that is one of the strongest indicators for positive outcomes for the kids out of the program. Have I understood that correctly?
That's close enough, Cathy, yeah. So the biggest outcome predictor is the completion of missions, or the only thing that shows a difference between those kids that do better than others. That's the one thing you can predict with, yeah.
Okay, so that's going to be a motivator that you may well be able to leverage in your communication with the grown-ups as well. I guess you guys as facilitators have also got some really good tips for how to get the tip sheets into the hands of teachers and into the teachers' inbox as well. So they're available in a couple of different formats, as you know, and I was wondering whether you could kind of supplement those tip sheets or deliver them electronically with a really brief video about each one. And I guess it's that picture paints 1,000 words, and that once again, those videos can be done, and don't worry about the technology, just contact me about the technology. That bit isn't nearly as hard as you think. But what you're doing is providing the information, a bit of an introduction, a bit of a why, so that they have some motivation and that they understand why the tip sheet is really interesting and powerful to look at, and that there'll be some learnings for the kid and for them and potentially the whole classroom as well. And that it will take a little bit more than a glance, but they've got a quick little summary and they've got some motivations for kind of clicking through and having a look at the attachments on your email as well. Once again, once you've worked up some of those information videos, Zoom is perfect. There's another program called Loom, L-O-O-M. That's also really, really good and quick and easy and downloadable to use as well. Yeah, so like many programs, so much magic happens in between the sessions, and your job as facilitator is to keep the energy right and keep the momentum going and keep everybody super focused on the outcomes and the finishing line as well. And you making that investment up front and then the adjustments as you go along, I suspect you could be having a whole lot of different fun and a whole lot of different satisfaction. Kathleen, anything you want to add onto this piece?
No, I think that's a range of good options around how we think and actionable things that we can do, efficiencies that we can replicate, that can be applied to whether it's the group sessions we're running with parents and how to get them along, and then what we're doing at those sessions that makes them keep coming, but also that support in between those sessions for parents and for kids and for teachers. No, I think it's a good range.
Okay. Now, I don't have a whole lot to say on this slide. This is about social communication, and I'm doing my little air quotes thing here. I know you can't really hear that, but it's obviously going to be completely and utterly dependent on parents and educators providing privacy permission and wanting to opt into this. But I do wonder what role social communication has by way of a background conversation or a background hum, as I like to call it. So when we think about how we communicate, so much of it is online nowadays. That is a separate webinar for sure. But what would happen if the grown-ups, the parents and educators of the kiddos in the program, if they were connected in something like a closed Facebook group that had a start and a finish date? What would happen if they were connected in an app like WhatsApp? I'm also a fan of Voxer, V-O-X-E-R, and that's a walkie-talkie type of app where you can leave each other voice messages and upload documents and links and videos, and it's just great. So I run quite a few professional groups, and we use Voxer as our social communication tool as well. So this is going to take a little bit of nutting out, and I would love to hear from anybody who has experimented with the use of social media and social media as a communication tool for the grown-ups to connect. I'd love to know how all of that went. If you're curious, I think it's going to take a fair bit of thinking through, and you're going to have to check with your managers, or if you are the manager, you'll have to decide about the implications and the documentation that it may require. But given that it is such an increasingly normal and natural place for us to go to connect and chat with others, I wonder whether there is a convenience and collaboration and an energy there that we can optimize for the grown-ups around the kids in the program as well. I think it could also be really good for the reminders and building up some energy and preempting some things and so on and so forth. So I think it could be quite a, I'm going to use the word light touch communication tool, but it's fact the complete opposite. But there can be a lightness of touch in the way that you can work with the group online behind the scenes. Kathleen, do you know if anyone's kind of gone to this place?
Not off the top of my head in terms of the parents or teachers doing the program, but certainly groups of facilitators in different sort of categories have done that for themselves. People think about it, sure. I don't know if anyone's implemented it.
You will be the first to know.
Fantastic. Do share your experiences. All it does is help everybody to get better outcomes and empowering all the families out there. So do let me know.
As we've already outlined, the SAS program is packed with features, and you've got a lot of resources at your fingertips that you can really, really message and really, really leverage. And the resources in the program really, really need to be optimized, and that's what this slide is all about, optimizing those program resources. And as I've kind of mentioned, you can start to shine the light on the features in the marketing phase and in the warm-up phase and in the come and join the group phase. You can certainly emphasize the value that they will bring to the kiddo in the program, the value that they will bring to the parents, the value that the resources will bring to the educators as well. And that's starting to pull in some of that what's in it for me thinking as well. But you know, Kathleen will be best placed to comment on how to really optimize the family kit. That's an investment and is a beautiful pack that needs to be taken really, really seriously, and the value of it really perhaps needs to be emphasized at times as well. The parent workbook, of course, now would be the moment that I hold it up, but it's just behind me on the shelves as well. And about identifying, I guess, once again, as an adult learner, we're all adults. Most days we're mostly adult, and we're all learning and committed to a journey of lifelong learning. And some adults, some parents, some mums and dads and carers are going to find that learning just different and they may well be at different levels of language and literacy, and there may need to be a bit of support required for them to really optimize those books as well. I guess because the nature of the parent workbooks is very sequential, it's very much about, yeah, it's going to build, and yeah, it's okay, and it will make more sense, and you'll start to see it, and we'll be practicing this, and really kind of setting the whole program out, and that it's not a race to the end as such, and that it's not an exam as such. It's about the commitment to learning the core concepts, the core language, the core missions, the core activities that the kids are progressing through as well. But it's very much that workbook, as I've seen it and understand it, as a place to keep all of the things. It's a real memory backup that you can sort of relax and listen, if that's the preferred learning mode, as one of the grown-ups around the kids, or you can take notes, or you can write, or you can put in diagrams, or you can really optimize that content to really hit your learning style as well. Now, I understand it's in different... Sorry, Kathleen?
It's also about being able to refer to it when your program's finished. So whether it's during that 6-month follow-up session or beyond, they've always got that resource to go to. And I'm just thinking too, while you're talking about the parent workbook, and pairing that with all the stuff you've been saying earlier around the engagement and the between sessions efficiency that we can do to help keep parents along the process, is some of the people listening to this webinar will be running their parent group meetings in the third format. So there's 3 options on how they can run the parent group meetings. The third one being 4 2-hour sessions, so to spread out throughout the program. And parents really benefit from a reminder each week of which pages in the parent workbook to go to.
Mm-hmm.
So the what's in it for me, the highlighting the main bits and why you would go and look at those pages, you know, all of that could apply really well to that format of delivery.
Kathleen, what suggestions do you have? Love putting you on the spot like this. For those parents who may be challenged with the reading and the learning aspect and language.
Yeah. So as a publisher, I guess, of the program, we have on our list of things to do to create a visual, simplified version of the parent workbook, kind of like teacher tip sheets, but with less words even, to help with people who have parents with lower education, lower intellectual abilities, or English as a second language. But that's not available now, obviously. So there's that. Some people, they buddy them up. So when you identify that through your intake and allocation process, who else in the family or in that child's life can read the book and can work together with that support person. That's another one off the top of my head quickly. Others, I mean, that's also why we have the slide deck, the live facilitator running the sessions plus the workbook, so that it can cater for different learning styles. If you've identified a family member who really wants to be involved and you need to adapt it all, I would probably try to factor in some individual sessions with that parent along the way. So whether that's a different, let's say you're an Australian NDIS provider, it might be a different line item around doing little half-hour sessions or phone calls or something to make sure they understand the concepts and not relying on the book. So that's one way. Another random example, we have a provider who have delivered groups with predominantly Spanish-speaking parents. The kids were English-speaking schools, parents Spanish-speaking, and they had bilingual facilitator translating on the spot as they were doing it. So there's some different ideas.
Love it. Love it. I'm also just going to sign off on this particular slide with the fact that I'm a trained coach and I love a coach approach. And I sort of believe that when we're working with adults and imparting knowledge, that a coach approach with powerful questions and active listening and reflective practice and some goal setting and accountability can also be a really, really awesome way to learn as well. So just dropping that in there quickly and clicking on to the next slide before Kathleen comments. Customer reference group. Now, I don't know, for those that are listening, whether you have actually ever engaged and invited in your customers, and let's just kind of think about who the customers are. The customers are pretty much the people who agree and sign off on the payment. And so it's probably the grown-ups, it's probably the parents, carers, maybe the educators. We'll stay open to that. But what about this concept of inviting them in? It will possibly happen after they have experienced the program, and inviting them in for, I actually call it feed forward. You will notice feedback, but I like the idea of feed forward, because that's what it does. It actually gives you a whole lot of secret sauce and a whole lot of intelligence and ideas that you can filter and brew and then apply to future programs. So it's very much about quality management. It's very much about continuous improvement. It's very much about your commitment as a facilitator to deliver different, to deliver better, exceed people's expectations, perhaps even exceed your own as well. But this doesn't have to be super complicated. It may be a 50-minute session. You may want a couple of shorter sessions. There may be some naturally occurring groups that you can kind of optimize for some of these conversations as well. So it's a little bit different to a feedback form where you tick and rate. They're really, really good. That's really good information. But this is a lot more conversational. It's you potentially stepping into a different and exciting role of being a facilitator and asking questions and probing for information and gathering consensus and really seeking some feed forward about what could be improved around the program as well. So for me, this is a very important part of the way I debrief many of the programs that I deliver as well. And I guess that is that last little word there, the debrief. What is it that you do in your organization post-program to look at the positives, to look at the negatives, to look at what was interesting, to look at what you've learnt, to look at what you'll change for next time, because that's how it's going to roll up to be even more remarkable with every kind of program that you deliver. So now we're getting to the business end of the conversation, and I guess I have the luxury of kind of turning up and chatting with Kathleen and sharing some thoughts and ideas and peppering you with some opportunities. But at the end of the day, your job is to kind of run through what you've just been listening to and putting some circles or putting some highlighters through the parts of today's conversation that really resonate with you. So I'm actually going to give you a quick little moment. I won't count, I won't sing, but just a little bit of silence for you to go back through your notes and just start to run that filter over. I'm really mindful that it's very easy to click out of these webinar things and dance off to the next thing with every promise to yourself you'll come back to it. But let's just make that easy for you and give you a little bit of time to check back on your notes. It's always awkward. I never know how long to leave for this part of the presentation. So pick those top 3 activities that feel really doable, and those top 3 activities that are doable and will move the needle the most by way of engaging the parents and the educators around the kiddos that you work with. Have a moment to think about, if you got those 3 things done, what would the difference be? What difference do you actually anticipate if those 3 things were to magically spring into action quickly and easily? So those 3 things somehow do ideally need to spring to fruition as well. So this slide is really about what you need to do next, your next steps to apply some of the strategies that you've heard about today during our conversation as well. So I guess it's, who do you need to talk to? What extra do you need to think about? What would the project around lifting the engagement even higher with the SAS programs that you deliver, who you need to kind of get authority from, what the timeframes are for what you have to do, what other stakeholders might have to do and approve as well. So I'm sort of stretching out my fingers in a timeline as I'm talking, and that's often how I think about projects, about what you're thinking of doing, what the outcomes will be, and what that adventure in between times is. So I will leave you with those suggestions. I will leave you with all my energy to help you get this good stuff happening. I know you guys are so energetic in delivering these programs. We're really talking about just that extra lift and how that could possibly happen, and that full wholehearted commitment to getting all that good stuff done.
Thank you so much, Cathy. I think there's lots of useful thinking and practical strategies for everyone there. And something I've been left thinking is, I'd really love anyone who's watching this and coming up with ideas to not only let me know what's working, what's not working, but also let us know if there's anything you think we could do differently or provide that can help you to do these things as well. Yeah, it's a bit of feed forward for us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you, Cathy, and thank you for the other webinars as well that are also up on the SAS Facilitator portal, and hopefully we'll see you again soon.